So, brothers and guests, I'd like to welcome you all to another episode or another broadcast of the North Carolina Masonic Research Society. We're really excited to have Worship Brother Tim Dahlman as our speaker tonight, especially because Tim is actually the first native North Carolinian that we've had as our speaker, and he has a fantastic presentation. But just a quick bio on Tim. He's past master of Phoenix Lodge number 8 in Fayetteville, North Carolina, one of our more historical lodges. The current senior warden of Ashburn Sterling Lodge 288 in Ashburn, Virginia, a member of the York Rite, Scottish Rite, a member of the A. Douglas Smith Jr. Research Lodge number 1949, as well as a member of many other invitational and honorary orders within Masonry. So, Tim, we're thrilled to have you this evening, and whenever you're ready, you can unmute yourself and jump right in.
Thanks, Matt. It's humbling to be here to speak before this august crowd, and to have that honor of being the first North Carolina natively raised Mason to speak here. The presentation I'm doing tonight, this is sort of a second version, or part 2 almost, but it's a standalone presentation, and it was inspired actually by an incident that happened many eons ago when I was feels like a long time ago, when I was a junior deacon at Phoenix Lodge. We had a lodge picnic, and there was a gentleman I met there, and me just being sociable and introducing myself and being friendly, I found out this guy who was a middle-aged adult male, that his dad was a past master of the lodge. And I asked him, how come, I asked him if he was a member there, and he said that he was not. And so we just got to talking about Masonry a little bit, and he told me that he was not a Mason anywhere, and he had no interest ever in joining. And I asked him what, and he told me that his dad had learned about the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and that he had sort of followed his dad into that order, and that was kind of where he felt his niche was. And my first question to him was the what? And so that started a conversation and me sort of researching and diving into and gaining an interest in some of the different esoteric orders. And I discovered that a lot of the things that were taught and used in those esoteric orders, there was a whole lot of overlap in Masonry, but there were some things missing. And so that started me on a personal research project to piece everything together and to figure out what it was, where the overlaps were, and what the differences were. And that's the premise for the first part of the presentation, or the previous presentation. But again, tonight goes a little bit deeper, and it's more of somewhat of a call to action. And with that, I'll go ahead and try to share this. Oh, goodness. Wow. Okay. Is that showing up? Can everyone see the screen okay?
It looks good.
Okay. So the classified arts and sciences of Freemasonry. This picture, it's an older picture that depicts the classifications of the different of the classical liberal arts and sciences. And so before anyone wonders, you know, is Tim giving up any secrets? It has more to do with classification in terms of order. And I'll begin with this Albert Pike quote, because every good esoteric program should begin by quoting Albert Pike. The premise here is of this quote is that Masonry can do a whole lot of good in the world. It can do a lot to promote peace and order within the world, but unfortunately, too many Masons do not know enough about what it is that they're studying and what they're learning about in Freemasonry. And so the hope is that, that others will dive into some of the deeper things that are communicated and taught or alluded to within Masonry, and that the order can become that much better. This is what we're going to discuss. These are the major topics, and I hope to wrap it up within a reasonable amount of time for question and answers at the end. One of something else about myself is that I've found that one of the things I'm good at is helping people through hard times, and then also performance enhancement and networking, and to help them to improve their creativity. It's always been somewhat of a natural gift for me, but I also had several years in education, leadership, and leadership psychology is some of the tangible credentials. I'm in no way trying to use this presentation trying to sell any skills or services, and the opinions expressed here are, you know, my own. They don't necessarily represent any Grand Lodge or lodge. My intent also with this program is to try to answer some frequently asked questions about why we should invest our time into learning to use some of the resources that Masonry has available to us. And I chose the name of the program as somewhat tongue-in-cheek way to express this, that what we're dealing with in the program are Masonic secrets, but secrets not in the way that you may think, not in terms of Masonic modes of recognition, but in terms of codifying and quantifying experiential learning. To begin, I'm going to use two analogies. The first is to make a fast and striking point, and the second is to cause a deeper level of reflection. The first analogy begins with the understanding that real secrets, the ones that are most meaningful, can never be shared person to person. Rather, it is knowledge that's revealed through personal experience and reflection. Without experiential experiences, in much the same way that individuals learn to know their deity. We form this knowledge through processes of many types of learning and experience. One example of this is the analogy of jumping out of an airplane. You can read about it and study it and watch others do it, but you can't really know what it is about until you actually do it yourself. And here's my alibi on the video.
The great enemy of writing isn't your own lack of talent, it's being interrupted.
But what's happening here in this video is these soldiers are getting ready to jump out of a Black Hawk helicopter. And one of the things about jumping out of a Black Hawk as opposed to other aircraft is that you're on the ground 1 second and disorienting how quickly you leave and get up in the air.
Worship Brother Tim, the video is not playing, but we're getting the sound.
Yeah.
It's not, the video is not playing?
Not on our end.
We see the PowerPoint still, but we hear the audio. It's going over you.
Okay, I'll skip the video. That'll, I guess, further prove my point that it's something that you can't experience unless you actually do it. And much like in Masonry, you can't experience, or you can't share what it's like to become a Mason and some of those experiences until you actually do it, until you knock on the door and realize what it is that's happening and have that personal experience. I'll get back to my script. Candidates for training to become paratroopers typically go through 3 broad stages of development. The aspirant who knows about it and wants to do it because it looks awesome. Then they go through the training and realize how much work it is. They assess its pros and cons, but understand the rewards. And then later, after they've had a lot of experience doing it, they realize that and view it as a strategic tool or capability. It's an insertion technique to move either large amounts of paratroopers or people to hold a piece of ground for strategic purposes, or in special operations for strategic surgical type reasons, to put the right specially trained people at the right place at the right time. Individuals recognize their part in this. And yeah, the video that I showed, it was a Black Hawk jump, but it was part of an airfield seizure. And so it sort of had that impact of jumping out of the airfield and then taking the seizure, the airfield. The second analogy, Freemasonry, is the same way. People can read about it and possibly even read exposés or such as Duncan's ritual, and they might even walk themselves through the ritual, but they cannot be made a Mason until they go through a certain process. These experiences are truly secret and bring us to the first major point of this presentation, experiential learning. I believe that Masons go through similar phases. They are drawn to the fraternity because of what they think it will be. Then they realize that it is a lot of work, but worth it, and stay with it. Then hopefully they see the bigger picture and understand how them being part of something bigger than themselves can have a positive impact on their own personal lives and ultimately the world at large. One of the most frequent criticisms I've heard about programs on esoteric topics is that they are all dealing with experiential processes that are not repeatable. And I would beg to differ that when done properly in a orderly succession of events, that they are repeatable. I think that our Masonic rituals are evidence of that, that not everyone has the exact same experience, but when you go through the same set of degree systems or in rituals, that the end result is relatively similar. It's one of those shared experiences that everyone has as a Mason. Experiential learning is also, or is a process of learning through experience, and is more specifically defined as learning through reflection on doing. And so what that means is you do something, and you, such as training, or you have an experience and you reflect on it and absorb and codify the information. Experiential learning occurs in Freemasonry. It's part of how candidates, officers, and lecturers are trained and developed. In 2014, DeFano and a series of other researchers from Harvard Business School conducted a research project and published the results in the Harvard Business Review, suggesting 3 key findings about experiential learning. First, that both students and heart surgeons, which were one of the subjects, and also new employees in an IT firm, learned faster and became better at their skill sets by opting to skip some surgeries or some business experiences and reflecting, contemplating, and then codifying, and finally internalizing what they had learned during each surgery or business experience, rather than continuing to practice. And in this case, when they were, in one case in particular, when they were dealing with surgeons, they had something that was contrary to traditional learning theory, that, or training theory, that individuals who go through more training are better equipped. But in this case, when dealing with the heart surgeons, they found that the ones that would do 5 surgeries a day and reflect after each surgery and contemplate on what they did and how they could do it better were more effective than the ones that were doing 10 heart surgeries a day. These were medical school students. And they had the same impact with customer service representatives and salespeople and other people within this business firm that was their test subject. And overall performance was enhanced by taking time to listen and learn and reflect rather than constant repetition. Second, that the practice improves individual self-efficacy, task understanding, and intuition, which can best be described as their belief in their own capabilities to organize and execute the course of action required to manage prospective students. Finally, that this practice contributed to overall organizational learning behaviors and overall organizational performance. And that takes me to the next topic of what I'm talking about and what specific aspects of experiential learning I'm getting at. The secret arts and sciences of Freemasonry, or the classified arts and sciences of Freemasonry. Just like there are 7 liberal arts and sciences alluded to within the fellowcraft degree, there are also 7 practices that I have found clearly identified or alluded to within the 3 craft degrees of Freemasonry. And then I identified some things that could be supplemental to the working tools as well. I'm not going to address each of these tonight because of time, and some of these, I don't have time to do all of these topics justice. So I'll try to address some of them in some specific areas that they are addressed within Freemasonry, and try to do some of it well rather than try to address all of them poorly. One of the concerns that people have, or that Masons have, whenever you begin discussing getting into some of these arts and sciences of Freemasonry, that those who express interest in it are trying to turn the lodge or Masons into this, that you'll, you know, that the concerns of the church, the evangelical churches of Freemasonry, are all going to come true if you start opening those doors and practicing it. When actually I believe that it would not, that probably people's homes would look more like this. People would maybe try to learn an instrument. They spend more time in prayer and thought and meditation, and they would probably purchase a few things to do in their own home, in their own time, but it, you know, would not change the the feel or atmosphere of the lodge considerably. So what are the classified arts and sciences of Freemasonry? It could allude to an organizational system of classifying and categorizing information. The term classified could also allude to something that is secret, concealed, or not exoteric. These are items that are veiled within the craft degrees, but are also in some cases clearly identified within the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite and some of the honorary and invitational bodies of the York Rite. And also in some versions of older rituals of ancient mystic order of the Shrine, and they're also clearly defined in multiple now defunct rites and bodies contained within orders that are owned by the Masonic Grand College of Rites. Albert Pike has stated that these are what are alluded to within the Fellowcraft degree, veiled under the guise of the 7 liberal arts and sciences. For the purposes of this presentation, I will address the 3 more prominent ones and more commonly accepted skill sets and some tools that are necessary to begin to approach some of these arts and sciences. The 3 that I'm going to address tonight are going to be Qabalah, tracing boards, and astrology. And the 3 skills necessary to approach these skill sets are concentration, meditation, and contemplation. And moving on to Qabalah. First, real quickly, this is important to address. There are 3 categories of Qabalah. Qabalah spelled with a K, which is typically associated with the Jewish religion and Jewish mysticism. Qabalah with a C, which is associated with Christian mysticism, and then Qabalah with a Q, which is significantly different from the other 2, and it's typically associated with Hermetic organizations and often in Freemasonry. And again, this is important to address, and I believe anytime that you're speaking about Qabalah in a public setting of any kind, especially a Masonic organization, because I have witnessed and personally experienced many times where a brother will either approach me privately or jump up in the middle of the lodge and say that he does not appreciate Qabalah being discussed in Masonry. And when I asked why and got him to calm down and get to the root of the matter, in some of those cases, the individual was a practicing Jew. And when it came right down to it, he felt like it was cultural appropriation, and he had never examined or even considered the differences between the different ways those are practiced. And so I try to address that up front whenever I speak about Qabalah in any public setting, is that specifically what I'm talking about is the Hermetic form of Qabalah. And within those 3 categories of Qabalah, you have 4 different types of Qabalah. You have practical, dogmatic, literal, and unwritten. And these are all uniquely different. Also, they're found within specifically Hermetic Qabalah. The 4 different, dogmatic Qabalah is about the formal teaching and learning. This is a study of literature about Qabalah. It could refer to any ancient or contemporary texts on the subject. This is an example of this is when you get a book about Qabalah and you read it, you're practicing dogmatic Qabalah. Practical Qabalah. Practical Qabalah involves initiations, meditations, visions, or ceremony. This is what happens. This is what you would hope to hint to happen to a candidate whenever you have someone going through a degree, like what we have within the 3 craft degrees or most of the degrees in Freemasonry. This background picture, this was a picture, this was a vision, it's kind of a famous one, that William Butler Yeats had when he was experiencing going through a ritual in order. And he wrote this down, and it's pretty widely published, but this was an example of the vision that he had. The image on the left that looks like I'm trying to hypnotize you, this is one of the older ways of expressing Qabalah. And these concentric rings represent the 4 worlds, to include, the earth, water, fire, and spirit. And this light is what happened at this light is the center beam, or a strand of white light. That is what happened at the beginning of the time in Kabbalistic beliefs, that when there was nothing there, or before there was anything, there was a point of white light, and then that point became a line, and that was the illumination of the representative of the illumination of the 4 worlds. And so it's like a beam of light came from nothing down to suddenly there was something, and there was a light. Literal Qabalah is the actual use or knowledge of the use of the science and arts of Qabalah. It includes 3 areas, the 3 areas of Gematria, Tamora, Notarikon as example. It is also learning the how and why of what Qabalah is. Gematria relates to numbers and symbols that tie either the name of deity or the Mason search of light to the individual. An example of that would be decoding of either the passwords that we're not going to say, or the letter G. Like, for example, I will go through this. The letter G that's often seen in many lodges. The G would stand for Gimel, which is another word for camel, which is a symbol of a traveler on a long voyage in the desert. That would be the image, maybe image that you would have would be of the traveler traveling on the long voyage. And that would be just one example of that. And one could contemplate on how a camel relates to the suffering of others, and how the traveler could possibly bring them assistance. Tamora literally means permutation, or wages and compensation. It uses anagrams to decipher and combine passages of scripture or writings to reveal hidden and true meanings. As the senior warden is charged to do within the ritual. Notarikon uses acronyms to describe either the name or power of deity, and examples of this would be found specifically within the Scottish Rite under the letters INRI or YHWH, and are often used to describe crucifixion, which would be relative, not necessarily of, I mean, people might have a religious connotation about crucifixion, but symbolically it could be associated with either a child, a sacrificed deity, or something along those lines. And either that or someone who was crucified against their will, or sacrificed against their will for the goal of information or some other treasure. And this is also practiced through some of the names used in the royal arch opening and closing. Another example is the word Amen that's used in the prayers, which is a Tyricon of the spoken Hebrew phrase Al Malek Nel E Mahan, which translated to mean God is our faithful King. Finally, there is the unwritten Qabalah. This is the gnosis, or the personal experience of direct communication with deity, without a mundane intermediator. And some of the ways that Qabalah is expressed within Freemasonry, again, with the point that becomes a line and begins to descend. That was another reason for using the airborne operation, or the guys jumping out of the airplane, as an analogy for this, because the beginning of these arts and sciences begins with a descent. After where the light, travels down through the Sephiroths from the heavens or the deity down through the worlds and then down to the material world. And all aspects of the craft degree broadly contain sections of Qabalah ranging from Malkuth, which is the material, the earth, up to at least Chassid. And degrees and other rites spell out some of the details that are found within the tree. And again, part of the study of Qabalah would reveal how certain aspects of Freemasonry clearly depict this. And just a real broad example, knowing how certain scriptures that are read at the circumambulation are tied to the place within the volume of the sacred law where it's open to before each degree is tied to the rest of the ritual and the lecture, and then a personal revelation that occurred during or after the degree during meditation and contemplation as an example of practical, literal, and unwritten Qabalah. And at this point, I've probably lost a lot of you, and you're wondering, where are these things actually being codified and written and documented within the lodge? How, why aren't we able to decipher and understand specific examples of where these happen? And so, I would ask the question, how are these Kabbalistic experiences, or these more esoteric experiences, how are they being reflected on and codified during our lodge experience so that the individual and the greater fraternity can benefit from this? In some cases, these events are somewhat experienced, at best, they're experienced and maybe forgotten. Some people on an individual level might take time to document or journal what some of these experiences are. But I seriously doubt many places capture these within the lodge minutes. This information that the candidates have or the officers have as they experience and, as they go through the degrees, it definitely is is not being captured anywhere within Freemasonry, not collectively, not at the institutional level. But I bet most lodge minutes will reflect what was had for dinner that evening. And, you know, read 3 to 4 times for the benefit of the craft. And so, you know, you have to ask where we're placing our priorities. Again, these are some more images that reflect how Qabalah and some of the deeper sciences can be reflected in the craft. Tracing boards are a favorite topic of mine. They are not used very often, or very many lodges, especially in the US that I've seen, doesn't formally incorporate these into the developmental experience of the Masons. I believe that the use of the tracing boards can accomplish much in the development of a Mason, that they are a tool that were used for over a century, arguably 2 within Freemasonry, but are not in use today. They're not used exclusively for candidate instruction or individual development, but they could be. They capture much of the imagery and symbolism that's used within Masonry and is clearly identified in our ritual. It is also identified in our ritual that Masonry uses symbols to imprint upon the mind several of the deeper and more important truths. And I'm purposely not using the ritual word for word. And some might argue that tarot cards also use the same symbolism to teach the same lessons. In fact, several people have argued that a lot of the symbolism in tarot card could be used for that, and I would say that's because most of the designer of the more commonly known Rider-Smith tarot deck was developed by people who are Masons, or the Waite-Smith deck. There have been 2 correlational studies that have been done, I can provide you the references to, that have determined that each of the tarot cards shown here on this screen have a statistically significant correlation with images that are expressed or described within the rituals of the craft lodge. Like I said, I believe that the tarot cards were designed by Masons with the intent to do what tracing boards once did, and or to supplement what the tracing boards also could do. What you'll notice is that there is I'll use the word tarot card, but I think the more important thing is, rather than the cards themselves, but the images depicted on the cards, that there is at least one tarot card involved with each path described between the different sephiras on the Qabalah. If you think of this as a road map, and consider that a significant amount of the first degree is addressed within these 3 spheres on the tree of life. When you consider that a significant amount of the imagery used in tarot cards, this is one example, can be found either within tracing boards or broadly within, you know, different degrees of Freemasonry. And you know, I think that the tracing boards can achieve most of the same results that a tarot card can. Again, this is known as path workings. One of the challenges with tracing boards and tarot, meditating on the symbols, is that there's supposed to be supplemental work and instruction that goes with them. You might not, so the average person might or Mason might not be able to just pick up a tracing board or the symbols and do some meditation for a few minutes a day and receive enhanced levels of enlightenment. Typically, you have to go to an external order, or, you know, at worst, buy some books on it and try to figure it out for yourself. The third one that I'm going to talk briefly about is astrology. Astrology was thought to be a science, a respectable science, for much of recorded history. We are taught that at one point in history, astronomy and astrology were synonymous, and that students of this science used the knowledge of the heavenly bodies to navigate the earth, literally and figuratively. Literally as actual literal navigation tools for the navigating the face of the earth, but also in navigating some of the social or political or other forces that were in place at the time also. Today we don't necessarily have to rely on either one for physical navigation, because we have maps, compasses, and GPS. And just to make a little analogy, I would say that astronomy is to navigation as the Waze app is to GPS. For those unfamiliar with Waze, it not only has navigation, but there's other information in there too. It's like a GPS with information about wrecks, blocked roads, debris on the road, or things that may or may not actually apply to you, but they're good information to have just in case they do. And a lot of astrology can be used to help understand some of the forces that are at work in the world around us. And again, astrology is described pretty clearly in each of the craft degrees, distinctly within the fellowcraft degree, but it's alluded to in greater detail in the Master Mason degree. However, it is a science that is dismissed today by some for two reasons. One, because it's thought to be superstitious nonsense and that has no bearing on the physical world. And second, because some religious dogmatism says that it does exist, but it's tied to supernatural forces that Christians should not practice or mess with. And in response to both instances, I would again reiterate that it is identified and used, whether knowingly or unknowingly, in the rituals of the Entered Apprentice, Fellowcraft, and Master Mason degree. And it is also one of the studies that students are encouraged to study within the Fellowcraft and also extensively throughout the Scottish Rite and also within some bodies of the York Rite. And one common reason that I would use as an argument for studying this topic, or the importance of it, is to understand in the same way that one understands various forces at work in our world through the news, so that we can navigate them. And again, the other areas that were addressed that I'm not going to discuss, but I will mention briefly, are theurgy, alchemy, and sacred geometry and geomancy. Again, I don't have the time to go into to give them any of the credit that those topics deserve. But next, moving on, the important tools for learning to work with and approach these topics are concentration, meditation, and contemplation. Concentration is a specific skill that can be trained by specific techniques within meditation that involve mental exercise, such as breath prayers or focusing on a single non-stimulating symbol for increasing periods of time over several months. In simple terms, you can practice focusing so that you can discipline your mind to learn certain things. As an example to this, well, Chuck Dunning has a very popular topic on this where you do concentration focusing on the circumpunct. And this skill is necessary so that you can learn disciplined meditation that's required to unfold some of these mysteries. Meditation is typically spent in simply observing. It is being aware of what you are taking in and letting the information be safely deposited in your hearts and minds. An example of this may be if you were ever put in a position to just look at the square and compass or some other Masonic symbol silently while you received information. Contemplation puts the concentration and meditation together. Contemplation is where you purposely try to unfold some of the meanings in a specific format. It is a disciplined skill, and when done correctly, it is very much repeatable, and individuals who follow the specific processes will frequently get similar results. An analogy that many of us could be familiar with, probably where you inadvertently saw these skill sets come together, is if any of you have ever worked with a candidate to teach them the catechism, or ever been a candidate learning the catechism. It takes a while, but you learn to develop and think in different ways and focus on different things so that you can return and so you can memorize and somewhat internalize some of the things that you're learning. But that is one area that Masonry does actually use to formally teach to improve concentration. And to take that further, if Masons would continue to work on and practice these in a more rigid or disciplined, structured way, you would probably have a lot more Masons who were able to memorize the ritual or lectures. And again, that would be just one superficial application. But applications explain the benefits while addressing the how. In this case, the applications are addressed in terms of how this would benefit the individual and how it would be applied. It also addresses how the jurisdiction could benefit and apply it. There are several applications that the individual can make. At the superficial level, the individual Mason could understand more about the rituals and the lessons of Freemasonry. They could also learn how to apply these lessons in deeper, meaningful ways to benefit their personal lives and communities. They would make Masonry as a whole better. However, with the current state of Freemasonry, this usually results in individuals who are seeking to do this. They typically go outside the fraternity to learn how to develop these skills and end up disengaging from their lodge for extended periods of time. Organizationally, there are several benefits for encouraging Masons to learn these at the jurisdictional level and district and lodge level. Superficially, these involve some of the benefits would likely include increased retention and engagement. According to the study that examined the impacts of experiential learning and reflections, that taking an approach to applying some system or having some system within the lodges, some formal system that taught Masons some of these skills would make lodges, districts, and jurisdictions healthier and more suited to accomplish some of the missions of Masonry. So it'd be enhanced performance. And the minutes of the lodge might also reflect more interesting discussions and actions that the lodge decided to take place. There are some models that can be incorporated to apply these. Many districts have found that they can incorporate training and education programs and designate individual representatives at the jurisdiction, district, and lodge level for all sorts of processes and efforts that the jurisdiction wants to support, such as blood drives or specific charities, or in support of a Masonic home or a youth home. That it's not a difficult process to develop and manage. We have systems in place. We have these management systems in place to protect the things that the fraternity values. We have, such as our rituals, we have a committee on work, we have district ritual officers and lodge subject matter experts. We definitely care quite a bit about our finances, and those are managed closely at all levels. We care a lot about the children, the elderly. And so my question is, why don't we place the same emphasis on the mysteries? In Tim's ideal world, each lodge would have a mysteries officer or something similar, and there could be a district officer also, or one of those officers at the district and grand level. And I'm still not sure why they're not. And in conclusion, there are many benefits to experiential learning at the individual and organizational level. Freemasonry has the opportunity to utilize several untapped resources by more effectively incorporating these classified Masonic arts and sciences. Several of these arts and sciences are already incorporated into our rituals. However, many do not know how to use them or how to apply them. Application of these arts and sciences could provide many benefits to the individual Mason and increase performance of the organization. It was indicated that models already exist for enhancing and managing operations of Freemasonry that could be applied to a deeper, more meaningful application and study of the mysteries that our fraternity already holds. And so that was all I have. I apologize, that was a little choppy, that presentation, but that's what I have.
Great job, brother.
That was
Thank
fantastic.
You, brother. Very good job, Tim.
Yeah, great job. Does anyone have any questions for Tim? Tim, Casey Shaw did have a question for you. He's not able to speak through the microphone, but he had a question about the resources or some of the books that he might be able to look into, maybe tying Masonry, Qabalah, or Hermeticism.
I can think of several. Like, does he have any specific questions?
Let's see.
I think Pike would probably be an excellent starting point.
I think Esoterica, definitely.
Yeah.
Morals and Dogma, if you have the patience for that. Yeah, I got like page 3. I'm done.
One of the more recent ones, I'll go ahead and plug Brother Jamie Lamb's book.
Yeah.
That addresses several of these topics in a lot greater detail than I had time to this evening.
Hey, Brother Tim. I've been watching the Facebook stream, and there's a question from Brandon Bowman. He asks, what books on geomancy do you recommend? I have one from Greer.
From Greer? Is he talking about the one of the Celtic Golden Dawn book?
I will find out.
Greer has done a lot. Brother Greer from Baltimore has done a lot of work on that topic, geomancy in general, and applications to Freemasonry. Also, he's written several top books on that. Let me pull up a couple classic ones, or classic works. Let's see.
Yeah, that's the one he's talking about.
Okay. Henry Cornelius Agrippa wrote quite a bit on geomancy if he wants to know just classics. And I believe that he was a member of an esoteric order, and you can definitely see a lot of his fingerprints within the rituals of Freemasonry from Agrippa's work. And he has a kind of a paper he wrote, or a research project. It's called Of Geomancy by Henry Cornelius Agrippa. And I would say that's a great place to start. And it's not very long, and you can usually find it for free in PDF just through a Google search. But that unlocks almost a completely new language within Freemasonry that lots of people have probably seen and never knew what those symbols meant. But Pike addresses it quite a bit, but Agrippa's study goes into a lot greater detail on it, but also John Michael Greer does.
Great, thank you.
Brother Tim, not so much a question, but a comment. First of all, great presentation. Second of all, if you'd like to discuss tracing boards, I was raised under the Canadian Rite, and all of our lectures are done by tracing board. So for us, it's still a principal teaching tool. So reach out to me sometime and we can talk about tracing boards.
Okay, yeah. I'd love to learn from your experiences.
Yep.
Yeah, it's on the chat session here, and another book about initiatic spirituality by Angel Mylar. Is another good book that addresses some of these topics.
Oh, we got another question on Facebook. Ben Sorensen, excuse me, asks, do you incorporate the Zohar?
Do I?
That was the question, so I'm guessing he's talking to you, yes.
Yes, I do. I think it's not a easy book. I mean, it's like reading a textbook. You know, you don't sit down and read that the same way you do poetry or fiction or anything like that. But yeah, someone else who I'd have to mention, two other people that are worth reading are Garrett Knight's work on practical Qabalah, and Beyond Fortune, as she wrote quite a bit about the occult sciences, and I'm pretty sure that she was a Mason, and probably not the same way that's accepted in some places in the U.S. today. She was from Great Britain, and she wrote pretty extensively. She was in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and a student of Mather's. She was also a clinical psychologist. But her book, Mystical Qabalah, is a great book. And she has several others.
Brother Tim, nice publication, or nice presentation. I was wondering if you had a bibliography you could publish.
I could. It's short. Yeah, I wrote. If you couldn't tell, I'm still refining the tying my paper that I wrote to the presentation. But yeah, I do have a bibliography I can publish. Are you on there? Are you on the reflected light page?
I am.
Yeah, if you just send me a PM, I'll get that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, does anyone else have questions for Tim? I'm looking at Facebook and the chats now. Tim, it's interesting that this is actually the third week in a row that the topic of tarot has actually popped up in a Masonic sense, and I've been seeing that a lot more recently, and I think there's maybe a renaissance or a new exploration of that. But you talked about the Rider-Waite or the Smith-Waite deck.
Right.
Yeah, and that, of course, was designed by Arthur Edward Waite, but the artwork was done by Pamela Coleman Smith, who was a theatrical actress in the early 1900s, right at the turn of the 20th century. But going through that deck, on almost every card, from a Masonic or from a Mason's standpoint, you see that symbolism just jump right out at you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's striking. It's almost distracting being a Mason doing it, because when I went through, the Boda program, and going through that, sometimes it was challenging to put aside some of the conceptions that I had and just allow myself to be trained and be disciplined. It's a yeah, there are a lot of ties there. But when I did, I found that the symbolism that I had previously learned was enriched even more so. Well, let me sell another book real quick, if I can. This book right here, I don't know if you can see it. This is a great...
No, we can't see it through your virtual background.
There you go. Well, no.
Let me hide some of my laundry and my NASCAR plates. The Kabbalistic Tarot by Robert Wang. That book is a great book for someone that just wants to learn, a real practical way to use this without having to go through, an extensive years-long program. The book is a good jumpstart book. I feel like you all are being extremely kind to me. I know my presentation errors as I made them, and so I'm judging myself. I know there were parts that were really choppy, and again, this is really humbling, and thank you for this opportunity.
It was a fantastic presentation, and honestly, we are always our own worst critic. I thought you did a great job. It was very informative. A lot of great information there, so I'm looking forward to going back and rewatching the presentation. Yeah, and I'll say next week we have worshipful brother Ryan Flynn as our guest, and I'm going to have to reach out to Ryan and tell him he's going to have to step it up a notch to try to beat the white dinner jacket.
Oh, I'm glad you have to follow him. If I had to leave you with just a couple of points, it's that a lot of these mysteries that are taught within, principally within the occult schools that exist, those things are right there within our 3 basic craft degrees. And I say basic. They're pretty amazing. And I would encourage everyone to take time to dig deep into those. And if you, my last point, probably the most important, if you ever, anyone, if you ever get a chance to have any authority within a grand jurisdiction, you know, please consider finding a way to formalize this and do it right within your jurisdiction. Have some, you know, I wouldn't suggest that this mystery program or these studies of these mysteries would be a mandatory thing for every Mason going through, but at least have it as an optional, you know, study program. Have something that's vetted. Keep your Masons engaged in the lodge. These guys that are into this, these are the ones that you want to keep, along with every other Mason. We all want to keep all Masons, but I would just, those would be the last 3 points that I would leave you with.
I think, Tim, I think you're absolutely right. We're seeing, I think, through the presentations that you find on refracted light and elsewhere, you're seeing that resurgence in that esoteric knowledge, or that thirst for that, you know, sadly is missing from a lot of Grand Lodge jurisdictions. I'm not trying to throw any of them under the bus, but if you look at the jurisdiction of New Zealand, they had a past Grand Master who issued an edict stating that if a brother even used the word esoteric, they were automatically expelled from the fraternity. And unfortunately, that edict has not been lifted from any Grand Masters since then, to my knowledge. So, yeah, people are more scared of the word esoteric than they are the ideas behind it. So you start talking to them about it, and they get engaged, and then you're like, aha, slipped it in on you.
Yeah, that's another reason why I kind of chose the title. If I said study esoterics, someone, but
I gave a presentation not long ago, and because our Grand Master, the second sentence or the first sentence out of his mouth after his election was that he is an esotericist, which was a bit of a shock for some of the brethren. I thought I should open up an esoteric presentation by saying first what esoteric meant. And I described the exoteric aspects of the Masonic emblem, which is that it's our logo. You see it on the building, everybody goes, oh, they're the Masons. But every Mason understands at least some level of the esoteric aspects of it, of what the working tools mean and what they stand for and such. So I was able to introduce them to that without them getting all jittery about the idea we're going to start talking about voodoo or something. That's all.
That's a good idea. Yeah, it was a good approach.
Hey, Tim. Hey, Matt. I know you were closing up, but we had a late Facebook question. Clint Green asks Tim, what are your thoughts on the chicken Qabalah system from Lon Milo?
That was one of the first attempts of mine to study Qabalah. I read that book, The Chicken Qabalah by Lon Milo or Rabbi, what's the name that he used? But that is a neat book. I like his approach. He definitely does it a little different, and for me, it was the right book at the right time. And I think that is another book that, you know, someone could pick up at Barnes and Noble and get just a real fundamental baseline knowledge of Qabalah and practicing. I think it's a great book.
Great, thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, we will we'll end for the night. But Tim, thank you again. We really enjoyed that great presentation, and hopefully we'll have you back to give another presentation in future.
Woohoo! Good job, Tim.
There you go. See, you got a fan club there in Curry.
Airborne.
Yeah, all I want are brothers and sisters.
All right. Well, everyone, have a great night. And if you want to rewatch the video, it will be posted in refracted light. So good night and be safe.
Good night. Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good seeing you.